Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the View from the Clipper podcast. My name is James, and again, joined by Josh Sexton. How you doing, Josh?
Doing good, man. Doing good. We just talked a little bit off camera about our heavy, exciting Christmases. So I'm looking forward to winding down, getting stuck into some more Clippers basketball talk now, but some more Clippers basketball throughout January as well, where I'm sure I'll be spending much more time inside the walls of this apartment that you see behind me. Because yeah, this is hibernation season now, but also a time when it feels like we can get excited about basketball and the Clippers in particular. How about you?
Yeah, no, I had a great time off. I think December is always a bit manic. I think everyone finds that. I think I had a bit of time over Christmas to catch up with some of the Clippers games, and some of them obviously we can speak about in this podcast, including the disappointing loss to the Spurs. But I think January is a great month to really dive back into the NBA. Like I said, hibernating for a month whilst everyone is recouping from a crazy December. Again, yeah, wish everyone happy New Year. I hope everyone had a good December. I think we can start off with where we left off, and I know we haven't recorded for a couple months now. And last time we recorded, Josh, you were heading off to Los Angeles. Yeah, it'd be good to kick off and yeah, ask you how you got on. What did you get up to, and let the people know. Yeah, what you got up to out there, and how your time was.
Yeah, it's a strange one because I probably got back about a month and a half ago now, but it's one of them, like as you say, because December is just so crazy. Like I don't know if that's a UK thing. I sort of presume that it's not. I presume it's a thing like in the US and other places where Christmas is just such a big occasion that December just feels like it's so, gearing up towards that, and everything is like the excitement whipping up, and then suddenly the day happens and there's like, a couple of days around that where there's some excitement into the new year, and then once the new year comes, it all just sort of drains away. So it's that like emotional roller coaster since going there. But the trip was just amazing. Like, from a sort of personal note as a whole, being able to go out there and cover the Clippers is like always, it's such a dream come true, really, isn't it? Like James, you're lucky enough to have gone and done it as well, and to like the idea that
Yeah.
that was like a brand that you built and were able to go out there and represent them. For me, like being able to go out there and represent like not only the brand that you built, but also just like Clippers fans in the UK, like doing this for all the guys in our Twitter group chat and things like that. It just felt like such a cool experience. And like shout out to so many of the people involved around the Clippers media as well, local reporters, Clippers media team and stuff, because they're so accommodating of us guys over from the UK. They were so excited to have me there, and obviously the Clippers went 4-0, which always helps. So I think I was a bit of a good luck charm while I was out there. But the games were brilliant. Being able to cover them was brilliant, and hopefully that's reflected in the content that we've been putting out on the sort of Clippers UK page in the last few days. But the bits that I shot and edited from while I was out there, because it was such good fun to capture them. And shout out to Grant Mona as well for helping me with some bits around that. Justin Russo, Brian Seaman for giving me some bits of, not even that's not even like it sounds like it's commentary from games, but literally I had Brian up in the bleachers recording those bits for me while he had like a little 15-minute gap in pre-game. So yeah, shout out to Brian for
Wow.
being so accommodating. Shout out to Justin for so many of those sort of snippets of sound bites of players and coaches speaking and things like that. And then shout out to Grant for help on the visual side of things. But yeah, just another like amazing experience. LA is like a second home to me anyway, and it becomes even more so because of my love for the Clippers. So I feel very lucky that I get the chance to, not only travel out there but go and cover the basketball team that we all love as well. And as I say, for them to be, so successful in that trip while I was out there too.
Yeah, there was if I remember rightly, there was a bit of a petition in the LA Clippers UK chat to get you a visa to
Yeah,
stay a bit longer because we
yeah.
were just playing so well. Just when you won every game that you attended, right? So that must have been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's funny because like Richard's one of the main guys in the group chat, and I think he was ready to come to the airport, to be honest, and like get like call up customs, get them to turn me around because he wanted to do everything to keep me there in LA. But yeah, it's like going into that spell of games, like I thought the Clippers would have, big chances in those games because it was all teams. It was sort of, around that 500 mark. It was the Utah Jazz, it was the Orlando Magic, it was the Sacramento Kings, and there's one other which I've forgotten at the moment, but it'll come back to me in a second. The Golden State Warriors was the other one. So it was all teams you'd expect the Clippers to be, sort of in competition with in terms of those 500 places. Maybe a little bit disrespectful to the Magic, 'cause obviously it's hard to judge with them being over in the East. But some really good teams in there, teams that can throw a lot of different weapons at the Clippers, and for the Clippers to come out of that run 4-0, for Norman Powell to keep doing what he was doing until he went down with injury, for James Harden to be leading the team in the way he is, Chris Dunn, such an exciting player to go and watch in Intuit Dome, like the way that Chris Dunn is able to use defensive stops and just a defensive some huge defensive plays to get that crowd on its feet, was unbelievable. Derek Jones Jr. bringing Lob City back to LA, and of course Zubac and the other guys off the bench who it feels like there's too many to mention, but so many key contributors for the Clippers during that run and across the season as a whole, which I'm sure we'll dig into a little bit more in terms of the recent games. But yeah, if anyone else, I kept saying this to people around the Clippers organization, if anyone wants to start paying me to go out there more often, then I'm more than happy to. I'm more than happy to continue to be the Clippers' good luck charm out there.
Yeah, I think we might need a GoFundMe for a little playoff appearance. I think, given the Clippers' record in the playoffs the last few years, I think we could definitely use a 4-0. Right? That's a playoff series win. So yeah, I was very jealous. Obviously, I was at home watching all the content you were putting out, and yeah, I'm still pending in terms of getting over to Intuit Dome and seeing it for the first time. I guess I wanted to ask you, what were your first impressions of Intuit Dome? Because obviously we've seen all the videos, the pictures, it all looks fantastic, but obviously it's completely different being there in person, right? And I'm sure you've got some experiences to share.
Yeah, it's unbelievably impressive, and it's one of those funny things, like me and you reference on this podcast a lot, that we're obviously both UK football fans as well, or English football fans. You're a Tottenham fan, I'm a Liverpool fan, and Liverpool and Tottenham have gone through quite a lot of sort of stadium regeneration in recent years. Spurs getting an entirely new ground, and Liverpool choosing to enhance their old ground. And there's obviously always facts of like American sports, I guess in general, that we don't necessarily want to see come into English football, but at the same time, there's so much of like the idea of like hospitality for fans and things like that. And I don't mean that as in like corporate hospitality. I just mean like your everyday fan who's clicking through the turnstile, paying to sit at the very top of the wall in Intuit Dome. Like the way that they're still so well looked after when they go to a Clippers game is stuff that we as English football fans can only dream of. And there's always going to be teething issues when there's new arenas, and a couple of the fans that I spoke to having issues with like the face ID getting into the arenas and stuff. But I think that'll be the sort of thing that becomes easier over time, and you'll start to see the merits of that. But besides that, that's probably the only downside you could pick out, really. Maybe the ticket prices being a little expensive, and stadiums maybe not being as full as we'd like them to be. Like probably the game I was maybe most disappointed in, just sort of start on the negatives. Obviously, I'll come on to the positives, but the Sacramento Kings game, like Sacramento obviously have like a quite a nice fan base up there in NorCal, but they're not known as like one of the huger and more sort of passionate fan bases in the NBA. And yeah, it sort of felt like it was quite nice in a way, because you have the wall on one side and the Sacramento fans on the other, but it did feel like the Sacramento fans probably outnumbered Clippers fans in the arena on the night as well. So if Ballmer can find a way to sort of smooth that transition into what we hope will be a really bright future for the Clippers, because of the amount of community work they're doing to try and get younger fans into Intuit Dome in the future. Just to make it more accessible to people who maybe even low hanging fruit to be Clippers fans now, people who may not have a basketball team, or people who just like LA basketball in general, or even just Clippers fans who are as passionate as any of us but don't get the chance to go so often. I hope there's more sort of incentive for them in the future. But I mean, we've all seen the amazing feature, and we've spoke about some of those things on earlier episodes of this show, haven't we, James? But just like
Yep.
the Halo board, like being able to see that live, the wall is such an impressive thing, and something that I think is really showing that it's making an impact already with teams free throw percentage when they're visiting Intuit Dome. Intuit Dome has become a bit of a fortress now as well, which is nice to see. There's obviously been a couple of couple of bumps in the road since I was there. But I think by the time I'd left after the 4-0, the Clippers, after an 0-4 start, was it 0-3 start? They were 9-0 at that point. So it really has started to become a fortress for the Clippers, and there's so much interactivity. There's so many different strands to it as an arena. I guess the best thing I could say to sort of sum it up is that it felt like home. And whenever you were in Staples Center, it was such an impressive basketball arena because of the amount of history there. But that history is not really built on the Clippers. It's built on what the Lakers have done, and that meant that it never truly felt like home. What the Clippers have now is almost feels like a blank canvas for them to build their own history and foundations on. And it was really special being able to witness that up close and personal, and be a part of that and be a part of as I say, hopefully the start of a very special era for the Clippers.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the start of something special, but you have to expect there are going to be teething issues, like you've mentioned, right? It was never smooth sailing, even in Staples Center, right, for the Clippers, and those issues are just going to carry over just due to where the franchise is right now. But there is obviously still like a hardcore Clipper fan community, right? And it's been built with that in mind. So I'm hoping that the allure of I guess one of the best basketball experiences you can get in the world, which Steve's obviously invested a lot of money into, will continue to be built on. And ultimately, a lot of it can sometimes just come down to the success of the team. Now, the Clippers have done, I think, performed over most people's expectations this year. But I think if you look at the stats and look at the team that they've got on paper, you're still missing Kawhi Leonard, who's not played a single minute. I think as soon as he returns, and we can speak about this in a bit, but his pending return will hopefully put more bums in seats and bring more excitement to Intuit Dome. Whereas before, you've only, I guess, not neutral fans, but maybe those who are not diehard Clipper fans, you might not be itching to go and see this team right now, but as soon as a big name like Kawhi returns, I think that's just the nature of sports in general. I fully expect to see tendencies go up, start seeing them sell out games, and obviously as they approach the playoffs, I think that's where the arena is really going to show its value, right? And you can win some games in the regular season based on atmosphere, but ultimately I think if you look at the NBA historically, atmosphere really matters in the playoff, and that's where you can really feel it. Going back to when we had our series against the Jazz, for example, that was always tough, and going to places like Dallas and even Denver, right? That's always been a challenge. So I'm hoping that when it comes to playoff time, LA will show up for the Clippers, and hopefully we're in a good position to make a good playoff run. I just wanted to touch one more thing on your time in LA. I know you spent a little bit of time on the ground, obviously covering 4 of these games, and obviously as you spoke about, we've released that series of Starting Five, which is a Netflix styled content, which I personally think is absolutely fantastic. You did an excellent job, and if you haven't checked that out yet, please head over to either my socials or Josh's, and you'll be able to watch those. I think we're on part 4 out of 5 right now. Is that right?
Yep,
So
got Zubats left to do.
yeah, coming soon. It might be out by the time this podcast is released. But I know in those clips you spoke to some fans. Obviously, you've obviously worked with some members of the media. Just wanted to get a sense of how they're feeling about the team right now. I don't know if you probably ask some fans or have a look on Twitter at the moment. Maybe there might be some discussions that the team's not in the best place after that really bad loss to Spurs. But I think overall, as I mentioned, the Clippers have been performing above expectations. So what is the feeling amongst fans and media from your time in LA?
Yeah, I think there is an element of surprise because people expected that without Kawhi Leonard it was going to be a really tricky start to the season. I think no one underestimated James Harden's ability to lead. I think people probably underestimated his conditioning to an extent in that he's been able to lead even in terms of like physicality as much as leading by example or anything along those lines. I think the players that we thought could be good going into the season. Guys like Norman Powell and stuff, who, let's make no mistake about it. Guys like Norman Powell and Amir Coffey, Terrence. These are all guys who've been, shopped around really by Clippers fans on social media. Certainly in recent years, have been ones who we've almost wondered whether there's deals to be made for them, which can go and make the Clippers more sort of look more like contenders, or go and get them another big star and things like that. And I think you're seeing now that there's almost like, it feels like there's more of a Clippers spirit to this team now. Like it does just feel like we have a team that is a team of dogs for one. I'd be interested to see how much that sort of transforms when Kawhi comes back. Because I think Kawhi is one of those real plug and play guys who you can put into sort of any lineup, and he'll lift the ceiling and the floor of that lineup. And I think there's so many guys there who just compete so hard night in and night out that's really what we think the Clippers should embody, and for the most part they have embodied as well over so sort of, if you look back through their history, obviously besides a couple of more disappointing years, but it does feel like the Clippers have been able to embody that spirit, and I think you get that sense from fans now, that fans feel like we're back in that place, we're back in that, we're underdogs because everybody is writing us off and everybody's not expecting us to be tearing up any trees, particularly when it comes to playoff time. But if we can get Kawhi healthy, which obviously, it feels like it's the biggest if in basketball, really, doesn't it? But if there is a way, and you'd hope the Clippers are managing it more carefully, you'd hope Kawhi's managing it more carefully, because the work of guys like Norman Powell and Amir Coffey and Ivica Zubac, etc., have got the Clippers into a place where you don't need Kawhi to be rushed back. Really, like, the Clippers have a good solid foundation there. You get them to the point now where, obviously, you don't want those guys to have run their race too early, but if you can get them to a point where the Clippers are looking healthy, and they're in a good position in that sort of top six picture, then you can bring Kawhi back, you can plug Kawhi back in, and we can go from there, and hopefully he can stay healthy into the playoffs as well. But that's the sense I definitely got from, like, the media and the fans, was that there is that sort of cautious optimism, because we've been stung in the past just by, I guess, any kind of optimism, whether it's been like, we're really confident because we're a brilliant team, or whether it's been, oh, we don't think we're going to achieve much. But then you start to sort of, that expectation starts to really build over the course of the season. So I think that cautious optimism remains, probably with a few more scars from the past, which is maybe why games like the Spurs game do sort of feel as disappointing to some fans as they do, just because we bear those scars, and we don't want to get too high on the team, because there's going to be some, it's an 82 game season. There's going to be some crushing lows in that time as well. And we as Clippers fans know that better than anybody else, don't we? So yeah, I think there's definitely is that cautious optimism, but just like a really good feeling, I think, around the place as well, particularly in the sort of media setup. I feel like nobody is like too down on this team, or too down on Tyler or anything. It feels like, that the not necessarily to say the sky is the limit, because I think there's a lot of better teams in the NBA than the Clippers still, even at this stage, and there will become playoff time. But it just feels like there's potential there for the Clippers to surprise a lot of people, and I think that's where a lot of fans and a lot of the local journalists quite like the Clippers being, because it makes for a better story.
No, absolutely, and I think you touched on it there. That game against the Spurs on New Year's Eve sort of summarised the Clippers in 2024, and you touched on that off air before we started recording. But it just has been an up and down year for the Clippers, in 2024 in general probably be remembered as another one of those years where there is a lot of hope and optimism to start, and come playoff time sort of comes crashing back down. But with the off-season moves that the franchise made, and putting them in a position to continue to compete, given situations with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they've done a fantastic job. And like you mentioned, a lot of people sort of have wrote them off from the start. But I think a lot of media and a lot of fans close to the team know that the Clippers, coached by Ty Lue, can compete with anyone, even down, their star players. They have continuously had players like, as you mentioned, Amir Coffey, Nicholas Batum, Ivica Zubac, Terrence Mann, who will just grind and fight and work for the team, and just incredibly valuable. And I think, I'm not close to many other teams, but I think it can be rare in the NBA that a team does that. And I think a lot of people are surprised that the Clippers are currently sixth, but also half a game from third seed without Kawhi Leonard, without the best player. And that, you put any other team in the NBA in that position, you take away their best player to start the year. I really don't think they're performing as well as the Clippers are right now. And obviously there is that additional context. You are playing teams with generational talents like they did, like they faced on New Year's Eve with the Spurs, and when Wembanyama, they just did not have an answer for him all night. And that's when those sort of generational players really start to take a name for themselves. You'd have to think, if we had Kawhi Leonard that night, maybe things would have been different. But ultimately, it's a long season, and I'm hoping things look good for 2025. But I guess before we get into the state of play and looking forward to 2025, maybe good to do a quick roundup of 2024. I just wanted to, I guess, give my sort of highlight of the year. I guess, how the year kind of started with the Clippers. They were in a great position after they'd integrated James Harden following the trade with the 76ers. Had only recently moved Russell Westbrook to the bench and had started to pull together quite an impressive run. And I think started the year with, I think, one of my favorite games of recent history following the Clippers, which was the 115-96 win at TD Garden against the Celtics. And I think that really summarized where the Clippers were at the start of the year and heading into the playoffs. I know there was a little bit of a fall off after the All-Star break, but the team were just really clicking with Kawhi, Paul George, and James Harden. It really looked like the ball was rolling and they had a lot of momentum heading towards that All-Star break. But I think ultimately it was that All-Star break where things started to unravel for the Clippers. They picked up a couple of injuries and, of course, ended up facing the Dallas Mavericks, where they started to slip down the standings a bit. They were at one point gunning for the first seed, right? So, again, sort of going back to that roller coaster year that the Clippers have had, they really started off the year high, and as they head towards that first round series with the Mavs, looked in sort of a weak position, and obviously Kawhi wasn't around for some of the end of the season, and just didn't look himself coming back in that series. And I've never seen him play like that. He ultimately looked like he'd never played basketball before. So obviously the season ended quite disappointingly, and ultimately lost Paul George over the off season. But I think, like I've mentioned, that the franchise have made some excellent moves to, as Norman Powell has famously been quoted as saying, a sort of addition by subtraction. I think he's even got some T-shirts on sale now with that coined. But that ultimately does summarize where the Clippers ended up in the start of this season, where they just have a great group of players without Kawhi Leonard, and sixth seed in the NBA today, with Kawhi potentially coming back on Monday. Is it Monday night or Sunday night against the Hawks? So things are looking good towards 2025. But I guess wanted to get your take on 2024 as well. What were your thoughts on the Clippers last year?
Yeah, I think I'd probably take the same sort of route as you to say that Celtics game at TD Garden was one of my favorites of last season. And just that week in general, really, it obviously started with that comeback win against the Brooklyn Nets, which was an early tip off for us. So I remember, all of us guys being in the group chat and talking about how much we sort of enjoyed that. That was how the week started. We then beat the Lakers on the Tuesday after that as well. Beat the Raptors, which obviously, the Raptors weren't up to much around that time, but then it finished with that win over the Celtics as well. And that was one of those weeks where, going 4-0 in a week is just so impressive anyway. But to do it in the manner that the Clippers did it that week, beating a rival, having a big comeback win, and beating the eventual champions in their own home was just so impressive to me. And I think was a sign of what that team was capable of achieving if everything was going their way. And I guess that's the sort of key thing that you almost do take away from last year, really. And it's obviously it's a year that comes in different acts, because obviously there's now the sort of the Paul George era, and there's the post Paul George era, which obviously there's some games which sort of fall the other side of the post Paul George era, but still in this year. But if you look at that Spurs game as you referenced, and I sort of talked about with you off air, like it did just feel like a microcosm of a lot of what the issues the Clippers had last season were in terms of, a bit of bad luck around schedule and things like that. Like I thought the Clippers were hard done by to have, a back to back with travel again, and we've seen the Clippers haven't been great in back to backs anyway. I think they split back to backs on the whole last season. I don't know what they ended up with for the year. Maybe we could sort of look into that at some point, but. Um, splitting back to backs last year, going 500 in those, but then also adding travel into that as well. Like it just makes it so much harder. And then, like you say, having a generational talent like Wemby, Chris Paul, having the game that he was able to have on that night as well, which he might be 40 or nearly 40, but he can still unpick a tired defense, and he can unpick anybody's game plan on his best days, and clearly had his legs under him, and none of the Clippers did, and it was disappointing, and they were out rebounded, they were out fought in that game. But as I
Yeah.
say, that you could say, too many turnovers, the other team having a lot of points off turnovers, all those kinds of things were some of the lowlights that we had last season, really. And I think it was almost that quite like a timely reminder of some of those lowlights of last season. But then I almost think like it's that old saying about that, irons forged in the fire, really, isn't it? Like because the Clippers went through a lot of those things, because they were able to sort of forge that team spirit through there, which is added to by, addition by subtraction, as you said, Norman Powell said in the summer, by losing Paul George, that team chemistry only tightens, then only tightens as people start to sort of force chips to be down against the Clippers and start to, act like the Clippers aren't series contenders. I think that's when guys in this team like to step up even more and prove that they're when the chips are down, they're prepared to fight and be the next man up, and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster year for the Clippers. Another one where that sort of, as I say, that optimism, which I think none of us had going into the season, really, because they didn't make many moves in the off season, but then they make the James Harden trade, and there's um a lot of optimism at first, which is really quickly, the air, sorry, is let out of the balloon so quickly. But then to go and turn that around, like build the fans' optimism up again, only to have it dashed again by more sort of health issues in the playoffs. Um, that could, I mean, touch wood that it isn't what happens towards the back end of this season as our optimism continues to build. But it feels like a pretty prototypical Clippers year, if you want to call it that. But also, last season definitely felt like a prototypical Clippers season. So I think we're both hoping, James, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to this and every Clippers fan out there will be hoping that there's better fortune to come in 2025. I've got a good feeling, but as I say, that optimism always has to remain cautious, you think, to an
Yeah.
extent.
It's always cautious optimism with the Clippers, because we fans, those follow the team, just been burnt so many times by having that optimism and hope. And I think, yeah, this was another year where that did happen, because like we've spoken about in that January of 2024, I think a lot of us really thought, wow, like we've actually got a team that can compete with the Celtics, beating them in on their own court. I think at that point in time, we weren't too far off even their record, maybe like four or five wins. So yeah, it was really impressive, but ultimately injuries have come back to bite the Clippers again. And we saw the end of that chapter, which was see the Kawhi and Paul George era. So I'm hoping that opening this new chapter with just Kawhi and James, and obviously the group that they've got now in Intuit Dome, it's the start of something new, and maybe we can be a bit more optimistic. But yeah, like you said, we are definitely going to be more cautious. I'm also quite hopeful for 2025. I at least hope that we have a healthy team for the playoffs, and we'll just see what happens. But ultimately, I just don't want to be heading into summer again saying the same old things, where it's it's health, it's this and that and then the other, right? But I mean, as of right now, and I did want to touch a little bit on the current state of play. And we've mentioned, obviously, we've just come off that disappointing loss to the Spurs, but ultimately Clippers 19 wins, 14 losses, sixth seed, as I mentioned, half a game behind third seed Rockets. And it's really impressive considering no Kawhi Leonard, no appearance as of yet. 11-6 at Intuit Dome, and obviously that includes those 4 wins that you managed to see, Josh, and that was really impressive considering the start that they had at home, and I think they're already starting to turn it into a little bit of a fortress. I don't think it is exactly what I was hoping for, but like I mentioned, I'm hoping we get a lot of the returns of this investment in the playoffs. I think what's been most impressive so far is the defensive rating, and that's continued. There's like I mentioned, there's been a little bit of time since we last recorded, but the Clippers are still top 5 for defense. That was something I was speaking about a lot before the season started with the additions that the Clippers made, bringing in Derek Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, and also Jeff Van Gundy as an assistant coach. They're really seeing the fruits of that, and they're about to add arguably one of the best defensive players to play the game in Kawhi Leonard. So hoping that we're only going to see that continue in 2025, and hopefully an improvement on the offensive end as well, because I know that's something that has taken a bit of a backseat since the Clippers lost Paul George. Obviously Norman Powell has stepped up massively, and we can touch on Norm in a little bit, but hoping that continues with obviously Kawhi coming in. There are going to be changes. There are going to be changes. It's not going to look exactly the same. We don't know what Kawhi is going to be looking like. Is he going to be on a minutes restriction? How long is that going to last for? They're going to ease him in. They're going to take their time with him. But I'm excited to see where this moves to, because I think as of right now, they're in a fantastic position. And I think, like you've mentioned before, they've had guys really step up across the board, where they have had more injuries, including Terrence Mann, Norm Powell, who've been out for different spells this season. Guys like Amir Coffey and even Jordan Miller have stepped up at points. So I think they're in a fantastic position. And yeah, any thoughts on, I guess, the current state of the Clippers heading into 2025?
Yeah, I feel very excited by this team. I think, as I mentioned, that what the Clippers mentality, I guess is sort of built on, is the idea of being underdogs. But I think like dog is the operative word within that, really, isn't it? And it feels like we do have a team of dogs now. We've got guys like Amir Coffey, who talks about the unseen hours that he's been able to put in off the court that people obviously don't see now that he's a successful NBA player. And I think that's sort of, again, comes back to that like irons forged in the fire kind of thing. Like Amir Coffey going through the times that he's had to go through in order to be as successful has made him into the person and player that you see before him now. Terrence Mann has always embodied that spirit. We've felt like as Clippers fans, and it's why he is such a fan favorite at Intuit Dome as well. The two guys we brought in the summer, Derek Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn, I would say have only served to like further enhance that identity and that mentality. Chris Dunn especially has just been like, a revolutionary dog, if that's the thing that you can sort of label him as, because he's just like brilliant. Like the mentality he's brought to the whole team. Like I do hope and believe that there is all defensive honors in his future, because I think he is as good as that, and I think he deserves to be in those conversations. And likewise, Derek Jones Jr. is such a high level defender, someone who is so prepared to do so many different things on any given night for the team, and as maybe not, I guess you would say he's not quite hit the heights on the offensive end that people would hope he would at this stage. But I think that's because you're expecting his production to step up so much in the absence of Kawhi. But soon, as you say, we're not going to have to worry about that. I guess the only concerns I have about Kawhi coming back, and it's where I do think Kawhi is such a plug and play guy that you can just insert him back into a lineup, and it should all still work like a well-oiled machine, because he doesn't demand loads of touches in terms of ball handling, so that can all stay pretty much the same. He's not like he's hogging the paint or anything like that. He basically makes his sort of own level of spacing, really, and I expect him to continue to do that and not impact the Clippers spacing at all in the way that we've seen it working so well so far. So all those things I hope do work in our favor. But I guess the one concern you have is that Kawhi, when he comes back, is going to need some managing back to full fitness, because being ready to play NBA games again is very different to being able to be good in NBA games again, or be elite in NBA games again, and lead NBA games again, be the best player on the floor on any given night. So they are two very different things, and that's where I wonder if there'll just be a couple of teething issues once Kawhi is back in the lineup in terms of,
Yeah.
just getting him back to full speed where people are still having to pick up slack, but maybe aren't getting quite as many shots and people are having to be a little bit more efficient. And that's where you maybe look to a guy like James Harden who hasn't had an efficient season so far, but we've all sort of accepted it because we've acknowledged that he just has to chuck up shots because he's accounting for the fact mostly that Kawhi Leonard has been missing. Obviously, Norman Powell's been putting up a lot of those shots as well and has been a lot more efficient. Ivica Zubac has got a lot of touches, so it's guys like them who may have to feel some level of sacrifice, and maybe it's just on Harden to make sure he's a little bit more efficient. It's on, I don't see what more Norm could do really at this stage, but then Zoo to make sure that he's, having fewer off nights than maybe he's had. And I feel a little bit sorry saying that for Zoo because he's almost not had the backup really so far, has he? Besides, Mo Bamba, I think he's certainly impressed me to start his time as a Clippers player, but there's going to be nights where I think Mo Bamba is not going to be able to make a huge impact on the floor. And that's where we're going to need to be able to look to Zoo and say, you're playing 38, 40 minutes tonight and we need you to be, really, really on it for every single one of those minutes. So, the expectation levels don't drop for anybody once Kawhi Leonard comes back, and I don't think we should get complacent to think that they do or that they will. But I just feel very excited by that prospect of not only seeing Kawhi Leonard play basketball again, because I almost don't want to go into it with the expectation of like, oh, this is how it's going to turn out for Kawhi Leonard playing basketball again. But
Yeah.
I just really hope that it means positive things for the Clippers. I really hope it can help the Clippers get a deep playoff run because I think this team is good enough to do that and has the mentality to do that and shock a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been a while since we've seen Kawhi Leonard play basketball, as you mentioned. The last time we saw him was in that Dallas series, and he just was. He was half the player, maybe not even half, to be honest. Like he had sort of almost zero impact. So he's really needed this time to focus on his injuries and get him back to a position where he can contribute. And I know for sure the Clippers aren't pushing for a particular date or anything. It's just as when he's ready to contribute, when he's ready to actually make an impact, he's going to play. I think the latest news, I think, was first broken by Law Murray, is that they're tentatively planning for the game with the Hawks, which I have just looked up on the side. It's Saturday night. It's not Sunday or Monday. I think it's just the old sort of UK conversions
Yeah,
where it's 3:30 a.m. UK time
it's
for anyone
Sunday
who's
for
really
us, all
staying
right.
up for that. Yeah, it's early morning Sunday. So it's coming up quick. We've got a game with the Thunder in between that, but yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm just interested to see how he fits in, how many minutes he plays. But like you said, there shouldn't be a lot of expectations either way. The Clippers are going to manage him. Ultimately, this is not where he's going to be making his money. It's ultimately the playoff time. That's when he has to be ready for. Don't really want to see a repeat of last year where they went with the strategy of just him trying to play as much as possible. The Clippers are great right now without him. Only, like I said, only half a game off of third seed, and just having him chip in every now and again, even if he starts from the bench to try and get some reps with the team. I'm happy with that. He's a generational player, and yeah, I really can't wait to see how he fits in with his team, because if he can return to the form he had sort of this time last year, the Clippers are going to be a scary prospect for a lot of the NBA. And I think a lot of sort of the West is for taking, because there is such a large group of teams that are so close together. Fully expect the Thunder to sort of run away with the first seed, but sort of second, third is reachable if you can get Kawhi back. But they shouldn't be worrying too much about the regular season, so long as they're in the playoff picture. It doesn't really matter where we end up, because the playoffs are a challenge for any team. I honestly don't really think seeding matters too much looking forward in 2025. I think just finish as strong as we can and make sure Kawhi is as healthy as possible, and I think we can have a really exciting playoff run. And that's sort of touching a little bit on sort of that 2025 outlook. I had a look just before we started recording, and the Clippers have got not the strongest of remaining schedules. You know, 49 games left. It's around 0.505 in terms of remaining strength of schedule. So there will be some difficult games in there. There are two Lakers home games, so the Lakers are yet to play in Intuit Dome. So those should be pretty exciting to have the first battle of LAs in 2025. Hopefully with Kawhi Leonard should all be well. I know they've sort of been on a little bit of a roller coaster this season as well. So those games should be pretty good. I'm looking forward to those. But also on the horizon, which will come up very quickly, is obviously the All-Star break as well. I guess wanted to touch on who we think might obviously get there from a Clippers standpoint, if anyone. Like we've been speaking about, the Clippers have really been a surprise package this season. And I think that there are certain players on the team that have been putting a lot more weight than potentially others who will be considered for the All-Star selection. Ultimately, you know, the selections are not ever really based on pure merit. There'll always be people left out. So I'm fully with the opinion that there could be a world there are no Clippers players in. I guess from my point of view, James Harden and Norman Powell are the two that stick out straight away. I think have had excellent seasons so far and should really be in contention for an All-Star spot. And if anyone I'm really pulling for is Norman Powell, because I know that that's something that he wants and I think has deserved. You know, currently the leading points per game scorer on the Clippers and 23rd in the NBA at the moment with 24 points per game and shooting almost league high of 45.1% from three, which is just absolutely outstanding. Like he's just been unbelievable for the Clippers and has really picked up that load from Paul George. So I'll be voting for him for the All-Star selections in 2025. But yeah, Josh, what are your thoughts on our All-Star prospects for this season, but also 2025 prospects as well?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned the two there. So I don't know if you've seen this because it's only just happened in the last hour, but the first return of the All-Star voting has come out. So James is actually in sixth with 314,000 votes behind Anthony Edwards on 411,000 in fifth. So I imagine he'll be on that sort of outskirts, but where the sort of area where you can get in if there are a couple of injuries and almost be, maybe be a reserve. He's in that sort of hot spot there. Norm's in 10th with 110,000 votes. So he does just make that sort of top 10 of guards in the West. He's behind Devin Booker on 120,000 votes. Now that's the area which could obviously shift because we don't know who's in 11th, and that's the bit that doesn't really get shown here. But I think, to be honest, like Norman Powell should look at that anyway as like a big sign of his achievements, like to have that many votes in the first return. Obviously, I hope that he can continue to rise through those ranks because Devin Booker's not uncatchable there. De'Aaron Fox in eighth on 132,000 is not uncatchable, just 20,000 votes between them. So I think there is a way he can continue to climb those rankings and maybe get himself just on the cusp of that sort of injury reserve or, spot there. But to be honest, like even to get into this, like even to be in the consideration as much as he is now, like the literal numbers being there, like not just him being in conversations, I think is testament to how much hard work he's put in, how much he's risen the level of his game to make sure that the Clippers are successful this season, and then for James Harden, he's a perennial All-Star anyway. He's a guy who deserves to be in the All-Star game because he brings excitement when he's on the court. The step back threes, the sort of flashy passes and playmaking that he's able to do, the dribbles, moves, step back moves, all those kinds of things. Like James Harden has got all the tools to be an exciting player in the All-Star game. So I really hope there is a world where we can see him there. But yeah, for Norm, I just hope he looks at that and he's proud. And I know he won't be, because I know he's the sort of person who'll be like, I don't take any of this for granted. Like, but
No.
also I'm going to strive to do the next thing, and I believe that I should be there. I believe that I should be, in X and Y position. But I hope there's a small part of him at least that can look at it and be like, you know what, that's kind of cool, because like who'd have ever thought that I could be here when people were, criticizing him
Yeah.
coming out of college and talking about all the things that he didn't have as a UCLA Bruin, and not being a great recruit coming out of high school and all those kinds of things. Like, to be able to say that he's in this position now, that he's in literal contention to be an All-Star is an incredible feat, and one that I don't think should be sniffed at.
Yeah, and I mean that's fantastic timing that they've released that
Yeah.
whilst we're recording. But yeah, I think backs up the point that both of those absolutely deserve a spot. I know there are not enough spots to go around, so it might be that Norm Powell has to miss out. But like you said, it's an achievement even being on that list because, I mean, I can't remember a time. I don't know if he's been on the list before. I highly doubt he's ever been on an all-star list. So no, that's an achievement in itself. But like, yeah, I completely agree with what you've been saying. I don't think he'd be seeing that as an achievement whatsoever. If anything, it's going to make him push more, knowing that he's at least in the conversation. How high can he get up? A hot month for Norm Powell leading up to February could push him over the line. But obviously, there is somewhere the cap there, and it may rely on like injuries and stuff, which is a bit disappointing. But I know how these things work. It is not normally down to popular vote, and it's not all the media who are watching the Clippers. He will just sort of be an afterthought, or something like that. So yeah, not expecting potentially a place for Norm Powell, but he absolutely deserves it. James being sixth, I don't think James was on. He wasn't part of last year's All Star
I don't think he was, no.
team, was he? No, he wasn't part of that conversation. And I thought actually last season he was pretty good. I think he's been performing a lot better this season, but I think a lot of people were surprised he wasn't even in the discussion last year. But he absolutely deserves it this season, and I'm glad to see that he's getting his flowers, and I hope he does make it. I know they're going with a slightly different format this year, which could be interesting. So I'm definitely intrigued and looking forward to watching that, and I hope we at least have James there to represent the Clippers and how well they've been performing so far this season. And I guess just potentially wanted to finish up with some light predictions, nothing on how the Clippers are going to finish, whether they're going to win the title or anything like that, but potentially seed finish, potentially maybe some awards as well. I know we spoke about it briefly. I know you may have touched on it as well, but we also got the end of season awards. Of course, Kawhi won't be a part of that because there is that minimum game threshold. But yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on where you think the Clippers might end up this season in terms of seed finish, and any awards for some of the great performances we've been seeing from the Clippers.
Yeah, you wrote me out of a Clippers chip early there, James. To be honest, I was ready to predict us being a low seed and sneaking up and winning the title. No, like in all seriousness, like I think there are some all NBA teams for the Clippers to be eyeing up. For James Harden, I expect him to be looking at all NBA teams and being able to force his way into there. Obviously, for Chris Dunn, as I mentioned, I think all defensive teams lie in his future, and maybe even Derek Jones Jr. if he can continue to sort of push on, particularly when Kawhi's back, and be a real defensive stalwart for this team. Norman Powell, I was just looking at the odds for MIP because I wanted to sort of get an idea of like whether Norm is in contention for that, and he's actually joint third favorite with Cade Cunningham. So I think there's every chance that Norman Powell can be in that conversation. Well, he will be in that conversation, but he should be
Yeah.
pushing for that award as well because he has stepped up so much this season. So they'd be the ones that I'd be eyeing up. And then in terms of a seed and finish, like I'd bite your hand off right now for a top six. I think the Clippers are good enough for a top four or a top five, but there's the sort of width of a sheet of paper between the Denver Nuggets, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Clippers at the moment. So I think it'll be one of those where like that will be a bit of a lottery come the end of the season. But I really hope that the Clippers can keep themselves in those top six seeds, can sign the Lakers hopefully to, if not another play, and then potentially even lower down in the table if the basketball gods are listening to us. Yeah, that would be they would be the things that I'd be hoping for, as much as trying not to expect too much, because as I said, we obviously need to exercise the patience as Clippers fans, pump the brakes and have the cautious optimism. But I'm cautiously optimistic that it can be a successful end to the season. What about you for your predictions?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to go with like an end of season predictions. I know we're both going to say Clippers title, right? But
Give us another few months.
yeah, we'll come back and we might have another go at that before the season ends. But in terms of seeding as of right now, obviously they're still very much in contention for all six of those places, but still obviously a lot of games to play. I think the Clippers always seem to gravitate to those 4-5 seed positions, especially on a good year. I think like a fourth seed is sort of a safe bet for this season, and getting that home court advantage in the first round obviously really important because whoever you play in the fifth seed is going to be quite a competitor. So I can definitely see them continuing this form with Kawhi Leonard in the team. Nothing explosive in terms of moving into the top three, but just enough to sort of see out what they've already worked so hard for. So I'm quite confident a fourth seed is on the cards. I can definitely see some awards. I think, yeah. Did you say third in the race for most improved for Norm? I'd take
Joint
those
third,
odds right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Joint third. I take those odds right now. I think he's. I mean, I can't think of another player who's been performing better than him. I know you mentioned Cade Cunningham. I think Pistons recently lost. Is it Jaden Ivey? So
yeah.
they keep a little dip in form, and maybe the spotlight would be removed from him. And with Kawhi coming back, if Norm can continue to perform, as a player scoring more than 20 points a game, I think that's more than deserving of most improved player. Obviously, we know how these awards can be, but I think that's probably one of the main awards I would predict for the Clippers this year. I'm hoping we at least have some of those defensive team spots, particularly for guys like Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. I think they really deserve their flowers. I think Chris Dunn, in particular, being someone who's a bit more senior, and the way his career has sort of moved, I think everyone in media and fans as well have started to see what an outrageous defensive talent Chris Dunn has been, and he has been moving under the radar for a little bit too long. I think now he's finally etching himself into the spotlight. So I think that work will be really validated if he can earn himself a defensive team spot. So I think those are probably my picks for the end of this year. And yeah, I'm really hoping that this is the one that the Clippers finally see it over the line. But if I'm really honest, I just really hope come playoff time they're in a really competitive spot. And the reason that we don't win it this year is just because we faced a better team, or just the chips didn't fall our way, rather than just the same old of just not having certain players, namely obviously Kawhi Leonard. But I'm hoping this is the year we can have just a real go at it, because I think it's what this era has deserved. It's what the fans deserved. Anyone covering the team. I'm hoping that this is sort of the culmination of efforts. But to be honest, I'm quite optimistic of the prospects over the next couple of years for the Clippers in general, just based on where they are today. And Kawhi coming back in a couple of days' time, I think could be really exciting 2025. And obviously, we're going to finally get to witness what playoffs look like at Intuit Dome, and that's going to be something that's really, really exciting as well. And something that I'd love to go out and experience as well. It's sort of a personal thing for me. So yeah, very excited for 2025. Any closing thoughts, Josh, before we wrap this up?
No, all good. I'm the same as you. I'm hoping that one day we can both be out there representing Clippers UK together in the playoffs, watching the Clippers, covering them at Intuit Dome. That is the dream for us, really, isn't it? So yeah, nice one again,
Absolutely.
James, for having me as always.
Yeah, no problem at all. And I guess like a final shout out, and I mentioned it in the podcast, but keep your eyes peeled for part 5 of Josh's series covering the Clippers, and there's also more content from his trip coming very soon. So please keep your eyes peeled on both of our socials for that. And yeah, that's been episode 5 of the View from the Clipper podcast. We'll probably record again before the All-Star break and wrap up some of the latest news, and hopefully we've seen some Kawhi Leonard minutes, and we can have a review of those and how he's getting on. So quite excited for that. Thanks again, Josh, for joining us. Remind people where they can catch your work.
Yeah, so I actually got consistent handles on social media, which is the biggest dream ever. I managed to do that while I was out in LA. So I'm J Sexton 24 across all platforms now. So that's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you get your content, you can find me on there, J Sexton 24.
Excellent. Yeah, I've not managed to achieve that. I can't seem to get the Clippers UK Instagram page.
One
That's
day.
something I'm still working on. But yeah, obviously, Clippers UK on Twitter, LA Clippers UK on Instagram, and Clippers UK on TikTok as well. So yeah, thanks again, Josh, for your time. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. And go Clips, go.